Hello, I'm Christian Koglazer. I'm an alumni and mentor of FRC Team 2059 The Hitchhikers. In this video series, I'm going to teach the basics of LabVIEW so you can effectively program a robot during build season. So let's start off by opening up LabVIEW. And the first thing you want to do is open up a blank VI. Now that's going to open up two windows. The first one in the front is called the front panel and it's gray. So we're going to snap this to the left. The second one is called the block diagram and it is white. And these are part of the same program. LabVIEW is very similar to something called functional-based program where you write functions and you use those to actually do your programming. And the front panel is where your interfaces and inputs and outputs are done, and the block diagram is where you do programming. So we're going to start with the front panel. If you go over here and right-click, it's going to bring up a palette menu, which has different things. It has, numerics, booleans, string and path, just graphs and stuff like that. And there are all sorts of just inputs and outputs, basically, and user interface stuff. So we're going to start by going to the numeric palette, which is on the top left, and add a numeric control. Click here, and you can drop it wherever. I'm going to name this something like input 1. And I'm going to add a second one of those. So right-click again, go to the numeric palette, numeric control, add it wherever. And you can select like one or two and use your arrow keys to move around if you want. And double click to rename that and name that input 2. Move this over like so. Doesn't really matter, and one thing you'll notice is it also created on the block diagram identical things. So you have your inputs, this is how you can input numbers, and then over here is how you're going to program it. Now lastly, we want to have an output of this. So go back to the numeric palette. This time we're going to do an indicator. I'm going to place it over here. I'm going to name this output. Now we have two inputs and output, and what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add the two numbers in input 1 and input 2, add those together and place them in the output. In LabVIEW, things always flow from left to right. For example, we have our two inputs here, those are on the left. If you notice on the right side, there's a little circle on each one of these, and for the input, it's on the left side. That's because simply you can connect a wire from here to here, and the information stored in input 1 will flow into the output. But we don't want that, so you can just select this wire and hit delete. If you right-click, we'll bring up a whole new palette, and these are your programming functions. We're going to go into the numeric palette for the block diagram, and we're going to add this function right here. What this does, if you're never sure what something does in LabVIEW, a good thing to know is if you do Control H, it brings up something called context help. And then you can hover over anything, and it's going to bring up the documentation for what your mouse is hovering over. So, for example, this says add, and it has two inputs on the left side. You have an X and a Y, and the output on the right side is X plus Y. So we know it takes the X and the Y, and then we'll output X plus Y, which is exactly what we want. So we'll connect here. If you hover over the little circle thing, it'll bring up a spool, and you can connect this wire wherever you like, whatever pattern, and we're going to connect it into here. And that's a bit ugly, and as you notice, it's also broken because there's dashed wire here, which means it's broken, and a red X icon. And a good thing to know with LabVIEW, because a lot of times you'll have broken wires, is if you do Control B, it's going to clear up every single broken wire in the VI you're working on. Also, this is ugly, so I'm going to right click, hit clean up wire. That's what it should look like. Normally, you'll just click here and go to here, and it'll be something decent. Then I can connect this into here, like so, and voila, we have two inputs added together and released an output. So if we type in numbers here, say 20, and then 59 here, and we run this program using the run icon, which is a little arrow up here, as expected, we get 79, which is the sum of those two numbers. Now there's also two other main data types you'll use a lot, and let's add those two. So go back to your palettes on the front panel, and here's a boolean, so we add a push button here, like so, and we want an output for that, so we'll use a round LED, and we'll also add a string control, like here, and a string indicator, and we'll just simply connect these two together, so the input goes directly to the output. There we go. And what you'll notice is each one of these has a different color, and that's because it's a different data type. So for example, the orange is doubles, which are numbers. The green is a boolean, which is true, false, or on or off. And the pink is a string, which is text. Similarly, you can have a integer, which is blue. So for example, if I type in a number like 2, that's an integer. But if I added a decimal place to that, say 2.2, it's going to change over to orange because it's now a double. So it's going to take care of that for you automatically, but it's just something you got to be aware of in terms of color coding with LabVIEW. Another thing is this is kind of ugly, so I'm going to clean it up. And one thing that's very useful is the cleanup diagram, which you can click here and it'll automatically format into something that's a little bit more logical. However, sometimes you don't want to format the entire sub-VI. Say I just want to clean up this, I can select it and just hit that, and it's just going to clean that up. And then I can select this one by one, and then I can use arrow keys, and I can move it, say if I wanted more space over here. That way you can get things to be cleaned up in a way that looks nice, but is a little bit more logical because you're smarter than a computer. And another thing that's very useful is you can run continuously, which forces the program to run in a while loop, which means all this stuff will change live as you input with them. So as you can see, when I change all those values, the outputs change accordingly for how they're programmed. There's also a light bulb icon here, which will kind of show what the program's doing while you're running it. So if you notice, I'm going to stop this real quick and spread this out a bit more so you can see it a bit better. Close out of this, and I'll run this continuously again. You can watch the data flow from the input go down to the add thing, get added together, it equals 84, and then it flows the output. And this model, you can kind of get an idea of what your program is doing. There's also nice debugging when your program's running. You can just click on a wire and it will place a probe, and then you can see what the value on the probe you placed. You add multiple of these, and that's really handy for debugging. Those are the basics for getting started with LabVIEW, and the next thing we'll cover sub-VIs, which I think is one of the most important things to learn and is very useful when you actually get into programming a robot.